Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Couple. I am Kevin McManus, and today we're going to be talking about our second topic in this series. The series is the language of clarity, and today we're going to be talking about words we work by, building a common language for clarity and connection. And this is really going to be building upon what we had discussed in our Episode 1, which was entitled Nothing to Hide, Practicing Radical Transparency Without the Fallout. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my co-host and let her introduce herself. And we're going to go ahead and start digging into this topic.
All right, awesome. I'm Leeanne McManus. And the language, and I like to say domain language, is kind of the main point of what we're talking about. Everything boils down to communication. That doesn't matter what it is. I feel like that's always the thing that causes frustration, or, you know, it's the key to it all, it seems like. So we want to talk about what is common language in the workplace. And in the workplace, that can mean on a project, on your team, the whole organization, like whatever that looks like. Could even be you've got different language you use with your customers, or if you're a nonprofit with your members than what you use. Like I've seen those sort of things where language makes a difference depending on who you're talking with. So Kevin, when you hear that, when you hear we need to build like shared language or shared domain understanding, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting, especially in the tech world, is the acronyms that everybody uses. So as you go from company to company, the context of where you hear a particular acronym is going to potentially change when you go somewhere else. And one of my favorite movies is Office Space. Mm-hmm. And
a TPS report?
The TPS report. And it was funny because I had seen that on the movie, and literally within like 5 years, I was with an organization, they had a TPS report, right? And I think those are the things that, help establish that vocabulary. And also some of the challenges is making sure that when we are talking to one another, it has to be in, as you mentioned, kind of that domain, right? What does that mean in the context of this environment, this business, this culture?
And even this project.
Absolutely. And by making sure that everybody understands that when I say TPS report, everybody has the same understanding of that. Vocabulary absolutely matters. And I think one of the things that we found operating in the Agile space and being not only, consultants and practitioners, but also trainers, is when you go into an organization, making sure that everybody understands, like in Scrum, you have a product owner, right? Not a product manager or a project manager.
Right.
There is a product owner in the context of Scrum.
Yes.
So making sure that everybody has that understanding, and that's where we go back to the radical, transparency, is the most effective way of introducing Agile into the groups that we found is have everybody there from the delivery teams all the way up to your management, that everybody is hearing the same thing. And when they hear the answers to the questions like, well, what is the product manager's role in Scrum? Right? Mm-hmm. Then everybody is understanding that, one, there's a product owner and they have a very specific set of responsibilities.
And a specific skill set that doesn't translate direct to the others. Yeah,
exactly. But that vocabulary definitely matters.
Well, I was thinking, just based on the first episode that we did, you talked about knowledge bias. Mm-hmm. So even that, I always think about somebody new joining your team, and you've got all of these acronyms or just general references of words that you say, that if you've been on the team for a long time, mm-hmm. you exactly know what it is, but you forget those things that other people may not know. And then that, if they're not comfortable and there is a lack of transparency, right? There's nowhere that's very obvious. There's not a glossary or some place they can go look, that they're going to make an assumption. So it's the same transparency problem. And then they're thinking, when you're saying DOD, they're thinking you mean definition of done, but you actually mean something else entirely, right? So there's that You have to be intentional about doing this and sharing it and keeping it visible, right? And accessible. So
Well, and I think one of the phenomena that often exists in organizations is this whole concept of tribal lore.
Yeah.
Which is, if you happen to be here 5 years ago and you got that email from such and such, or you were in this presentation on this specific day, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But in the absence of that experience, there's assumptions, and that's where the knowledge bias comes in. So you have to be very deliberate about making sure that when you're talking about that vocabulary, it's not just for those that have been here for 5, 10 months / years. You also have to be thinking about, as we grow and we interact with new people in the organization or people outside that are providing a service, that they have that same understanding. So how do you go about making that part of your culture and making that part of your organization in a way that you don't have to be at a particular moment in time to hear that information?
I even was, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, forever ago, I worked for a very large nonprofit, good-hearted people. Everybody was shared on the mission, but it definitely had us versus them between department feel. And I think about it now, I didn't realize it then, but I think there was some of this domain language stuff and that knowledge bias and siloing. And you can't be as successful as you need to be if you don't come in alignment with that.
Yeah.
So even when you were talking about on Agile teams, like if we're going to go and do an Agile transformation, we want everybody to hear the same message. That's the sort of thing that didn't happen, right? So this group, this department referred to certain things or had access to certain things or did different things. The other groups didn't know. It ultimately works against the common goal.
Right.
So I don't even think it's intentional. I think it's human behavior.
Yeah.
But without the intention and the awareness, that's what is going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah. So can you talk about shared vocabulary as far as how it might fit for some of these things we've got here, like onboarding, growth, accountability? What are some guidance things you might give to the audience about that? Like, what would you do to try and build that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, once again, going back to kind of that culture, and especially like on onboarding. That's an opportunity where you have the opportunity to set the expectations and to be able to level set. And I worked with a great company in Bozeman, Montana, in fintech. And the owner, every time that there'd be a group of individuals that came in, he would share kind of the history, and it was a storytelling type of setting. But everybody that was in that organization, because they went through that same consistency as part of their onboarding process, it helped to develop that culture where it was no longer just in the the owner's mind.
Right.
It's something that he made that a part of who that company was and brought people into it to say, this is the history that has occurred up until the point that you're here, but a year, 3 years, 5 years down the road, you're going to be part of this history as well. And if you have a better understanding, it's kind of the, for those who don't understand history, they're destined to repeat it.
Right.
Having that consistent messaging at key points when people are coming into an organization, or if there's a significant change that's happening as well, that's where that vocabulary and that transparency, the combination of those two, really helps to establish that foundation for the long term.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think a new person coming in also, comes with their own experiences and understanding. And so the assumption thing definitely is going to happen. So I think the team or the leadership needs to build some pathway, some model again to say, here's our domain language that we're using. What do you know about these? And that you need to include them in that, right? Mm-hmm. Because it can help expand it, but it needs to be transparent.
Right.
And accessible again. I was thinking about the accountability with it too, that not even just somebody new, but somebody who isn't clear on it, you kind of can't hide behind the fact that you don't know as well. So you need to have some positive ownership in speaking up and going, whoa. I'm thinking you mean definition of done, but that's not making sense with what you're saying. Clearly I'm not. I'm going to raise my hand and be vulnerable and say, am I wrong? Am I missing something? And they're all going to laugh and go, oh, sorry, that's one of our acronyms. Here's what it is. Here's what it means. Here's how it impacts you. But if you don't speak up and you don't have any ownership in your own knowledge and getting engaged in that, you're not really helping the situation either. And you're kind of perpetuating the problem. So that'd be some of the things I would say. So how would you build or give guidance around building, we're referring to it as the living language framework, but across whatever that is, your project, your team, your department, your company, what kind of frameworks or what kind of things might you give guidance to a group for?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what we had talked about in the transparency is having the ability to set up an environment where you're modeling that vocabulary and looking for opportunities where can we reinforce that vocabulary. As I mentioned, with the onboarding, when those folks came on, there was a consistent part of their onboarding where they received that message. Depending upon where you're at as an organization, some companies are well established. They don't have a lot of attrition. They don't have a lot of new people coming in. That environment is different than somebody who's fast-moving startup and they've got a lot of churn that's happening. I would argue that in that second situation, you need to be much more deliberate about finding opportunities more frequent, weekly staff meetings or all staffs, and making sure that vocabulary is shared, because repetition is key. Marketing, statistics say, it takes like between seven to 9 times for somebody to hear the message before it finally clicks.
It's not that they're not listening; it just doesn't click.
Absolutely. I mean, we're inundated with so much information and so much, noise, that in order to cut through that repetition and having that regular cadence where you have the ability to reinforce that vocabulary, I think is really important.
The other thing, there is a funny story I was thinking, which I guess I might just say it and you all get to know us a little bit, but we did our first international project 10 years ago, right? And we were with a lot of Glaswegians and Irish people and UK, like just British speaking people. And we were dealing with some data stuff, but the whole project was kind of new to us. And so we assume there's things we don't know. And I remember do you remember what the scenario was? Somebody said, what was it?
I was like, I must be totally off base, or this has got a different meaning here in the UK, because they were talking, and we're in a technical, training, right? And they were talking about sharding.
Right.
And I walked up to one of the
Surely that's not what you
I went
mean.
up to one of the program managers. I'm like, I don't get it.
Is this a Glaswegian thing?
Yeah, it's like they're talking about sharding. I said, what does that mean to you? And she shared with me, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the vulgar
accident.
terminology. Yeah, it's sharding. It's actually it's a concept within
data.
Yeah. Right. And it's with a D, not with a T. And I'm like, oh, okay. So even that little variance, as far as how the pronunciation occurs, because I'm like, these are all like, new college grads, and I'm like, I don't think this is appropriate for the workplace.
But I was thinking about that with your example of us talking about you need to kind of have the onus to ask or whatever. But if you don't say it, and also the 7 times, like hearing it, I'm sure that your brain, you were disengaged with the rest of the stuff they were saying, because you were like, why are they talking about that right now? It was
distracting.
Yeah, it's very distracting. So it's a great example of, if you don't ask, or also I need to hear it a few times, or I need to see it, and then I go, oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it was an epiphany for me, because all of a sudden my world expanded. It's like I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah. But that is something else to keep in mind if you're working with teams that are across the globe and that sort of thing. And I've definitely seen that. Actually, through COVID, when everybody had to adapt and figure out how we were all going to work online, we had to really look with a fine tooth or a fine lens on, wait, does that mean the same thing in India that it means here, that it means in Buenos Aires, that it means there? There was a lot of that. And so when you have disparate locations and you got people that are cross-collaborated and cross-global teams, you definitely want to have a shared domain language. And so everybody understands that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
So we used to do some stuff, right, in technology where you would teach, let's say we're working with the business and we're trying to get to a shared understanding of something, the best way to do that is to draw it out.
Right.
And so a lot of times it's very simple. It's simple ways to get to make sure we're talking, because even on, let's say we're trying to talk about something we're going to build, I'm going with what I think. We're saying the same thing and you're going with what you think and somebody else is going with what they think. Until we draw it out, that's when we realize, oh yeah, no, I'm talking about over here. You're talking about over there and you're talking here. Which one are we actually doing? Right. So that there's a lot of this. It's not just words. It's everything that you know coming into it, really.
Well, and I think one of the other things too that helps in the vocabulary aspect of it is being able to, as you mentioned, drawing it out. What that does is it removes every person's interpretation of what they're hearing.
Yes.
And now you've got a common visual that everybody sees. And now you've put that mental picture in their mind.
Right.
And especially when you're like dealing with abstract concepts. Just this week, I'm teaching a class with new software engineers, and we're going through object-oriented concepts. And I used my Tootsie Roll example, right, to explain to them what encapsulation means. And that's something that, once again, it's like, okay, how are you going to use a Tootsie Roll Pop, to describe object-oriented concepts? But I've had people that have gone through my classes that years later, they're like, hey, I totally understood encapsulation after you talked about the Tootsie Roll Pop and, how you could, hide the data behind the hard candy shell.
All I can picture is the owl.
I know.
What does he say? How many bites?
How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll?
Yeah.
It's one.
You will always remember that.
3. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's good. So we want to talk about some of the other things that you might see maybe as symptoms coming out of this, but just a high level talk around why these might matter to you, why they might matter to your organization. And I can personally say that when there's a misunderstanding in the vocabulary or the domain, I personally am motivated and driven by a return on investment. I do not like to waste my time and energy. Like that's for me. Other people are okay with it. That's my don't like it. So when I have to redo something, it's probably on me because I didn't ask, or somebody didn't explain it, or we made assumptions or whatever. To me, that's a major miss. And if you scale that across a company or a team, that's pretty massive. It can be massive.
Yeah.
It's a lot of rework, causes a lot of frustration, causes disengagement, causes all of these other things. So the ambiguity is not a good place to live. Right. It also, so this also causes decision-making problems. And, it's got like a scaffolding problem. It's got domino effect, right, of how it can affect things. So when you have it, so it's very much along the transparency line. When you have that shared domain language and the vocabulary we're using and the acronyms we're using, and when we refer to this project versus that product versus whatever, we've got a single source of truth, right? Where do we go? Do you have a SharePoint site? Do we have a Confluence page? It doesn't matter what the tool is, but is there one? And do we all know how to get there? Do we all have access to it? Is it constantly updated? Is a living document so when somebody new comes on, it's up to date. They know where they go. They can ask questions. It's not something we built once that's stale and doesn't matter anymore. I think that's some important, things to think about, right? And we have this statement too. It says language isn't just semantics. It's the operating system for collaboration. And it really is. You have a broken system if you don't have shared understanding on the things that you're talking about and working on, right? So what would you say are some of the symptoms, Kevin, unhealthy symptoms of when you have a lack of common language? I kind of talked about a couple, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think when you don't have that common vocabulary, that common language, one of the things that often manifests is that rework, right? Because there's not a clear understanding of what we're trying to accomplish or how we go about accomplishing something. And that rework leads to a whole series of other symptoms. As you mentioned, it's the frustration, the lack of progress, right?
Missed goals. Money spent out the door. Yeah.
Right. And that's just it. There's a tremendous amount of waste by not having a clear understanding, of what everybody is talking about.
Well, it's better time spent to get all that information up front before you start working to make sure you have clarity. So even if this is like we work in the technical world and we're talking about agile teams and you're dealing with requirements, it's much better to spend the time up front to make sure you have clarity and don't make assumptions on what those things are, right? So that drawing it out or whatever, so that you don't have to waste and you don't have to, cancel the sprint or whatever is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too with regard to the vocabulary is also recognizing that there's not going to be one single individual that's got the full dictionary.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And I think you have to be aware that sometimes in order to accelerate and move something forward, you have to recognize that you're going to require a number of different people in order to get that full picture.
Yeah.
And once again, it goes back to that intellectual, humility that if you are a person that it's like, I'm not going to expose myself, or I'm not going to look like I'm in a weaker position because I don't know what that means.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So all you're doing is you're delaying the inevitable, which is if you don't understand that, and if somebody, has the ability to come in and contribute, it's kind of like what we talk about, like with Napoleon Hill and the Think and Grow Rich, right? He came together with these individuals, and what he recognized after going through years and years of research and working with these individuals is you have that mastermind that's created. When you bring two people together working on a problem in a synergistic relationship, there's that third mind or mastermind that's created.
Yeah. It's kind of energy.
Yeah. And when we, talk about it on the technical side, you look at, Kent Beck and the extreme programming. That's actually a practice in there, pairing. Well, the whole purpose of that is we all have blind spots in our experience. But when you bring a group of people together that have that common language and a common goal, the ability for you to be able to really accelerate through a process, or to be able to come up with, different creative solutions. And then once again, if you have that common vocabulary, it's like you can move mountains in a very short period of time if you've got the right people and the focus and that common vocabulary that everybody is speaking.
The clarity is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some of the symptoms. So obviously, we've talked about the waste and all of that. But people talking at each other and not with each other, and that's where you become I'm kind of holding a grudge or whatever it is because I'm irritated from whatever. Why didn't you just say that? Or why didn't you explain whatever those things are? And then just the rising tensions. And I've been part of meetings like this, and I think most people have, where when the frustration starts to hit, that they're like, well, I thought you meant this, and that's why, and they're angry, and it can start to separate the team, right? In what you're trying to get done. So there's some badness that comes out of it for sure. We talked about some of the roles and just getting alignment with that. Even that, it's like we're not necessarily always talking words, but whose role does what? That's another domain thing. Like when especially if there's something new, like you are introducing like agile roles or something like that. But even beyond that, sometimes there's ambiguity in who's actually responsible for this. Who's in the know, who's making decisions, who's just needs to know versus might like to know versus those things. Like, so we're trying to be transparent. We need to know the rules type of thing, right? We joke about anybody who understands Agile and talks about why we say done, right? And that whole thing, that came from ambiguity of somebody's assumption, right? So if I said I'm the PO or whatever, and I'm saying, so is that feature done? Story blah blah blah, and you're an engineer and you say, yeah, I'm done. I got mine done.
Coding's done.
But it didn't mean everything that needed to be done to meet the definition of done was finished. It's not really done. The quality check hasn't been there. The testing standards haven't been there. Those sort of things. That's really perfectly aligned with what we're talking about with this. So in any business, not just technical, this stuff comes up. Right. Doesn't matter what it is. Yep. There's something else that happens that's called ghost conflict. And I know you've seen it, so you can put it in your own words, but explain what ghost conflict is.
So basically, if you've got longstanding relationships and experience with a group, there's some debt that comes along with those relationships, and there may be something that it's like, okay, I've tried to communicate this in the past, it's not worked. So rather than addressing it, it just kind of is this undercurrent that's always there, and you never get any resolution from it.
Body language shows you, but
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very common. And I think that's where, as individuals, we need to be able to recognize, one, are we operating in that mode? And then secondly, are there others that, within a team are operating in that ghost mode as well? And how do you go about addressing it? And that goes back to the trust, that goes back to the courage, that goes back to the vulnerability aspect of building strong working relationships with the people around you. But yeah, that ghost aspect of it, it's a very descriptive term because it's just kind of like a haunting.
It's there, you just don't see it.
You just don't see it, exactly.
Yeah. So I think people with a higher EQ that naturally kind of get that sense probably feel it, where people with lower EQ,
Right.
if it's not you, maybe don't notice it. And so you have to be kind of vulnerable and go, I feel like there's tension. Can we have a little retro or something where we can it kind of needs to be facilitated with care, but can we kind of get this out so we can all figure out what's going on so that we can get back on track?
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things that we just went through is the Working Genius, right, from the Table Group with Patrick Lencioni, and listening to their podcast. They talk about this is how we felt before, but with this particular framework now, it's like you've provided vocabulary for how we're feeling. How does this person?
It's always been
operate?
there.
It's always been there, but you haven't had the ability to verbalize it.
Yeah.
And I think that was a perfect example. So when we were traveling back to Montana and we had that podcast going, we listened to, I don't know, at least 4 hours of it. It was really enlightening, to be able to hear their perspective on it, because that really is true. Is if you don't have that vocabulary to be able to describe, how people get joy out of their work
Or their frustrations. Yeah.
right?
Because you judge what they're not doing or
Right.
whatever, and you're not understanding. Yeah. So if you don't know what we're talking about, we'll talk more about Working Genius and some of these other models that we wholeheartedly believe in and think it will help you. But so we're kind of referencing it today, but we'll do other sessions or other episodes talking about it. Yeah. But that ghost conflict is there. It's really, I think it's ultimately a form of disengagement, frustration, like all of those things. Unspoken, unresolved, and poorly understood disagreements is what we've got for it. It's usually passive, sometimes passive aggressive, right? But it's generally passive. People might avoid things altogether. They might avoid certain topics. They might avoid certain people. They might avoid certain meetings. So I'm sick or whatever. Like you might see symptoms that if you don't recognize the other things, you don't realize what it's coming from. These all kind of intertwine and this can be the result from it. So we have kind of like an example here of a scenario. So a product team disagrees with leadership's decision to shift priorities mid-sprint. The team isn't consulted. So it's a change management thing too, right? And feels disrespected, but no one's saying anything directly. The team continues working, but you might notice that conversations are going to be guarded now. So people might not stand up. People are going to sit there and just listen. They're less enthusiasm. They're going to miss their sprint goals. Maybe they use excuses. So maybe they're sick or whatever. A subtle us versus them, because they feel like slighted by whoever made the decisions, because whatever. Collaboration with the product owner or with the business who's funding it, or all those sort of things. So conflict within the team. So this isn't always the one thing, but this definitely can be. So this is a simple solution to try and fix. And then if it's not fixing it, then okay, troubleshooted that. What else is causing this problem that we can get to? Yeah. But so here's some highlights of what you might say if you feel like there's ghost conflict going on. Whatever it is, whoever's leading it or whoever's kind of like the influencer might say, okay, so what are we not talking about? Right? So that's like, I like to do a retro that way, where you set the context and you say, today we're just gonna focus on how we're communicating and working together. That's it. I don't care about the work getting done, none of the other stuff, but set the context and then ask specific questions. So that would be a very specific questions. I want everybody to write down on a sticky, siloed by yourself. Don't be biased by anybody else's, and write whatever comes top of mind that we're not talking about. Is there anything that anybody feels like we're not talking about?
Yeah.
Right? Like the big elephant in the room type of thing. Pay attention to shifts in tone, body language, and silence, especially if it's unnatural silence for somebody. Encourage the use of neutral, safe phrases like, I hate saying the word unpack, but can we unpack that later? Or can we unpack that further? Can we drill into that? Whatever you're going to say, tell me more about what that thing is, because I'm sensing that maybe there's more here, and collectively from the team or whatever. I feel like we may be operating with different assumptions. That's a really good one, actually. I have a feeling that we might all have different assumptions. Let's maybe write what our assumptions are. You could do that too. Normalize healthy disagreement as part of team maturity. I completely agree with that. I think if you don't have disagreements, if you don't have healthy disagreements, you're probably not, your team is not functioning, right? But you'd have to know how to manage and facilitate those in a way that gets you back on track. So those are a few of the things that I would say, techniques that I would do to try and kind of pull it back off the rails. But anything that you want to add, Kevin, about maybe how clarity builds connection and culture, or anything else related to this?
Yeah, I think the clarity is the antithesis of the ambiguity.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't understand what a particular phrase means, or if you don't understand a particular concept, or you got a different definition, of what's being discussed, that leads to the ambiguity. But as you kind of tease those out over time, and you gain a better understanding of it, and you have clarity of the situation, it's no different than our vision. If we're working in a foggy environment, or our eyes are clouded, or they're not clear, we're not going to be able to make the best decisions. We're not going to be able to observe, what's happening in the world as accurately as it is. So I think the clarity aspect, and making sure that you focus on the establishing that vocabulary, that domain language, so that everybody has that clear understanding is such a critical point of, really building an efficient organization, and to be able to deliver. Especially in this day and age. I mean, things are moving so quickly that the lack of clarity becomes a significant liability. You can have companies that don't move fast enough, that they're here today, they may not be here next year.
Yeah, but also it's like overwhelming with how much change is happening at the same time. So you got to have grace for people and assume good intent.
Yeah.
Too. So I want to say one more thing as you were saying that, is that I also think that starts to build your confidence. So you may have been frustrated, or you may have had, a little grudge or whatever, and as soon as you can air it out and kind of get, okay, I have clarity now.
Yeah.
The confidence for yourself, the confidence back in the team, or the focus of what you're trying to do will improve. I've got a few just key practical tips to build common language, which is in alignment with kind of what we were just talking about with, I would hold a retro with the team and kind of facilitate it, but start small. So align on 5 to 10 frequently misaligned words, or things, or people, or roles, or whatever it is, right? So maybe have everybody write out, let's as a team, let's write out whatever we have either currently have as a misunderstanding or ambiguity around, or have had. And let's get that out there, because then we can do better about, sharing the information with others or whatever. Sure. Use facilitation. So with your planning meetings, your retros, whatever, pause and define a term when it causes a problem. So that also takes awareness and some EQ in the middle of the conversation too, to be like, I'm watching your face. So if you're doing online meetings, this is another reason why people need to turn their cameras on.
Yes,
it actually drives me crazy, but because that's something we didn't even talk about, that definitely causes problems with all of these things.
Yep.
If I can't see your face and I don't see that you're confused, or I don't, the body language is really important.
Well, and also keep in mind as well, it's not only a matter of turning your computer on so that you can see that. The other thing, and this is just kind of a side effect of the world we live in now, and the living on Zoom, is you can tell when people are not paying attention and they're distracted.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's another aspect
Yeah.
of the communication that is impeding progress as well.
Which will trigger me, because we're not getting a return on investment.
Right. Because it's like, okay, if you're in the meeting, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to it and not missing anything.
Yeah.
But people have been conditioned.
You're supposed to multitask.
Right.
Yeah.
To be multitasking. It's like, okay, I've
That
got
just
this
means you're
meeting.
not focused.
Right. I've got this meeting, but I got this other work that I need to
Yeah.
be working on as well.
Yeah.
well, what's the purpose of you being in the meeting? Because I
Right.
guarantee you're only getting probably about 20% of what's being said.
Yeah. And there is something to be said about, I'm saying, let's build a glossary. Let's have these things out here. It's all for naught if people don't take the time to read it or they're not paying
Absolutely.
attention to the meetings. It's kind of doesn't serve a purpose. But yeah, you're totally right. I it just occurred to me with the whole online thing, which we all live in now. That needs to be part of your team agreement is that we all show up for each other and we're present. That being present means we're not going to extend this meeting and talk about garbage that we shouldn't be talking about. Like you create some rules around that. A couple more is just coach cross-functional understanding. This is huge. So yes, you may understand it and it's in your role, but how does it affect somebody else? Or will somebody else need to do that? So encourage empathy across roles. That's a huge thing. And it is not a tech only type of thing. It is any company. And I've worked in operations forever and it definitely occurs there. It occurs in sales. It occurs everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like throw it over the wall thing is not a good way to work. Right.
Yeah.
So having that, even if that's a tactic you do to do it is, I'm not saying you all need this, but maybe we all need to understand empathy for somebody else. So let's put on the shoes of some other position, some other role, and let's do it that way. And that may actually break the ice where you're solving the problem across the team without talking about the team, kind of. And then the last one is say, what do you mean when you say blank, right? So instead of assuming, and I know I kind of do this just generally, I'm like, and I don't know how I say it. I don't say it exactly like that, but I either have people repeat back what they heard me say, or I might repeat it. And it's kind of annoying. I think that they're like, oh, I'm doing it for conciseness. I want to make sure I'm not making assumptions and I want to make sure you heard what I meant, right? Because I use a lot of words when I talk. And so maybe I use too many words or whatever. Those are a few tips that you could use to kind of try and turn the boat around a little bit. So, all right. I think that's everything we were going to cover for this, Kevin. So
Yeah, it was a good discussion.
are good. Yeah. So that's the second episode we had in our first series, The Language of Clarity. Our third episode is Lost in Translation, The Hidden Cost of Misalignment. You can see how it's going to nicely fit in with these first two episodes. So thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to any of your feedback. Follow us on all of our socials and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.